Should we start? Yeah, probably. Welcome to Heidelberger Kunstverein. We had a wonderful opening yesterday. Sex Reenchanted has started, and today we have an artist talk with Şafak Şule Kemancı, Ehrenstein, and Zoe Williams. And I will introduce the artist, and then I will ask the questions. And after a while, I will ask you if you have any questions. And I start with Şafak Şule Kemancı. Şafak is a queer activist, artist, and a curator. They live. I'm still learning the pronouns, and it's hard when you speak so many foreign languages and not in native. They live in Istanbul and work with collectives. I saw your work for the first time in Depot, Istanbul, and it's a place for contemporary art founded by Osman Kavala, who sits in prison for unjust. There is no reason. I mean, because of Gezi protest, and Erdogan thinks he is the organizer of such a collective, political protest. And then we met, and now you even created a new wallpaper for this exhibition. And probably for many of you, wallpaper is an extraordinary medium. And I want to start with asking you what is the references behind this work, and why are you using the medium of wallpaper?
I think it's on. Thank you, Mehveş, and thank you for inviting me to do this wallpaper. I've been making wallpapers actually for maybe about 20 years now. It all started with, I used to hear people saying, oh, as long as queer people, what they do within their own four walls, I'm okay with it. I always heard this, and this used to irritate me so much, because we don't need anybody's approval, or we don't need anybody to be okay with us. And in the same time, to be pushed within four walls, I just was so irritated. So I started by taking photos of myself with lovers and friends having sex, and just putting it on the four walls, and I wanted it to be out in public. So I wanted to stain the walls with the queer desire and just put it in public. And for this exhibition as well, when you told me about the theme of the exhibition, I just thought of a wet dream actually immediately. And because wet dreams are usually associated with men, and I just wanted this to be a wet dream of ecosexual lesbian.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Do you want to explain a few of the motifs, maybe? What kind of bodily fluids we see?
Usually I'm inspired by nature a lot, and this wallpaper is the same. And for example, I like putting some queer-coded visual language in the work as well. Something a bit like fisting, for example, is very and some butt plugs and ejaculation, and and some needles. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. And there's even menstruation. I couldn't, pre-sex with the reddish, flowery. Yeah. I didn't recognize it. You told me yesterday, and I was like, menstruate. Yeah, but then you explained me. Yeah, thank you. My second question goes to Zoe Williams. She's a British artist, lives in Marseille, and you are also sitting in front of your work and the Olispo series. And I choose to organize this talk among your works, and this Santa Agata's Revenge is also your work. And what is unfortunately not visible now, that in this exhibition many artists are also doing performances. Dalila, Dalléas, Bouzar activates her work with performances. CANAN is also coming from the performance art as well. You are doing many collective but also performative works, and you too. And also you do films, and when people see your films, they can see that you are also using some of the artworks as part of theatrical staging. So I wanted to ask you this performative aspect of your work, and how to activate erotic objects. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you. But, yeah, I guess the objects are often, I see them more like as characters or props that are like not always fixed in their status kind of thing. So I don't want them always to be like these like high art objects, but to be like functional, and maybe, and also like why part of the reason I like ceramics is because it has this like domestic feeling as well. So that's always been quite important, because sometimes they might come into my like living space as well, and I can't school them, or I don't know. But yeah, so I guess like with the performative aspects of the work, I try to make these like either installations, or it's kind of a bit, it's difficult to like talk about without seeing the visuals of it, but I guess yeah, like this, I want there to be like a sense of like activation of the objects being like performers and the space, and then people are kind of implicated in that by work, like having to encounter them, or yeah. And sometimes I use kind of reflective, shiny surfaces, I guess, as this way of also like maybe trying to seduce or play with the seduction and the kind of gaze and
yeah. And we once talked about the medium and the ceramics still seen as something not a part of the high art, but actually now the feminist art always using the like mediums that were seen as not in the hierarchy high position, but you also use some of the props as a fetish object. So can you also, is this the notion of fetish, I don't know, does it play a role in your artistic practice?
Yeah, like fetish as in the sexual fetish, or like objects are fetishized.
Yeah, like this little bottle you used.
Okay, yeah, well there's a bottle that I used in this film called Sunday Fantasy, which is like meant to be kind of slightly like tongue-in-cheek, like erotic film, where I had myself, actually, two other artists, and my friend who also is a director of it. Four of us kind of played out our fantasies within this film, and then like set out the like all of the set of it as well. And part of it was meant to be a fictional lesbian priestess from the Roman Empire who found a perfume bottle on the beach, which is in the shape of like an old scent bottle, which was like a Roman scent bottle, but it was kind of activated by her pissing into it. So that's part of, but yeah, it becomes like this vessel, and I guess I use urine quite a lot as this symbol of like, kind of a joyful symbol, but also like a debasing symbol, and thinking about it as like this golden liquid or currency, and trying to like, and also obviously there's like a fetish around golden showers and these things, which is when you pee on somebody, for what probably people know what golden showers, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I was planning to show this film, but the director sent no. It's a bad joke. No, but we watched it, and I was like, maybe it's too much. But sorry, I'm just kidding. It's a bad joke of yeah. because then we decided to show Muslim fantasies from Berlin queer community. So sorry, maybe we can make a screening of Sunday. But it's a good combination moment with your practice, Anna Ehrenstein. You're a multimedial artist. You do installations and so many collective work. And we knew your work and your struggle with Orientalist tropes already, and then we decided to make a new video essay together, and it was such an incredible moment for me to bring you together with a Islamic erotics researcher, Irvin Cemeshik, who lives in Boston, and he says, I will never go back to Turkey because my research field is kind of problematic, I think, but he was so you worked with his collection and you brought people from Berlin together to animate the old erotic miniatures. Could you please tell us about this process of making a new video essay?
So when you go downstairs, you basically see 3 work cycles. And as you have said, for a long time, a lot of my work, whether it's collaborative and I do South-South collaborations, or I've been working a lot on Orientalism or Neo-Orientalism, because I'm a Muslim woman living in Germany for over 20 years, so I encounter that a lot. And of course, they say research is me-search. So I was really interested in seeing what do these tropes of Karl May going to my ancestors and talking about how wild we are 200 years ago in Germany, how are they navigating through digital and physical spaces, how are they reflected in stock platforms, in videos that become viral. So the first video work that you see in this Orientalist avatar of mine, and kind of also a hypersexualization of a Muslim woman. Like, yes, I have been asked if I want to wear my hijab during sex. No, I don't. But that's experiences you go through, and then you work through them in your art because it's fun to take these things and to own them and then to break them because you make them bigger and you tickle them. While that work that you see in the front and this horrific title of the work that I stole from an 18th century painter called A Melody for a Harem Girl by the Sea, which was a French painter who had never been to the Middle East, is juxtaposing a short sequence of 2 hijab porns with women cutting their hair in solidarity to the Jihad Azadi protest, not saying women should not have the right to not wear hijab. They should 100% not live in gender apartheid. But it was just really weird to see last year how nobody is protesting for the women in India literally being burned for the right to wear a hijab, but the whole world turns crazy when women are being when women want to unveil. So this hyperpolitization of the veil is kind of the first room. And then Mehveş contacted me with Irvin, which she just spoke about. And that was a really great process because although I can talk a lot about Neo-Orientalism and the whole history, it was also a really nice moment to not center whiteness in conversations. So it was really important to look at that archive and then speak with other Muslim figures who are part of queer communities, and to also, of course, speak about what colonialism has done to Islam and how, like, a very gender fluid understanding and a more sex positive understanding now, as in all the far-right movements globally, is becoming an understanding of homosexuality being a disease of the West and us not being Western, meaning us not being gay. So how these tropes are being instrumentalized, but also just looking at this archive and asking yourself, what happens if I activate an archive with artificial intelligence? Because I can only project, like, pre-colonial Islam did not think about queerness. Pre-colonial Islam did not think about gayness even as an identity. That's things that I'm projecting inside it being part of a queer community right now. So while I'm projecting my thing, also there's this concept by two writers, Ibrahim Musa and Shadia Sheikh, that is future friendships, and they're talking about like painters, writers, thinkers that have been marginalized. So instead of them painting or talking to their contemporaries, they talk or paint into the future. So my relationship to that archive is also me having a conversation with the unknown painters Irvin gave me access to, and also looking at Islamic time forms, because in Islam there's ideas of multiple time forms. So it was actually a really beautiful process to have access to this archive and then have conversations with the paintings and the paintings talking back to me.
Yeah, it's became an incredible video essay. I recommend you all to find 15 minutes
Very long.
some day and watch it like completely. And yeah, one important aspect of the exhibition, my initial point was Canan's Bahnames, and these are like contemporary works but made in neo-miniature style and quoting old Ottoman erotic manuals word by word. And when Canan did these drawings, it's of course part of her heritage, but it's when I try to contextualize it, something. Is it the micro? Is it working now? Is it on? Okay. When I try to contextualize it in Islamic, like saying it's also Islamic heritage as well. Canan was not very happy with this idea because are they Ottomans, like the representative of Islam for us in Germany? Yes, but in Turkey it's maybe different how they perceive it. So I want to ask Şafak, because Şafak, you are a very active member of queer community in Istanbul, and of course Islam does not belong to your, like, because it's the dominant religion kind of in Turkey. Is it maybe not part of the identity building aspect? Or what I want to add, like during political situation in recent months, we had to find pink washing because queer rights were, or like even feminism and queer rights were instrumentalized as if there is a civilized part and a barbaric part of the story, and actually these people who are extremely brutal are the civilized one fighting for the queer rights. And people, many queer communities said, human rights are not transactional. You cannot pink wash such a thing. So I want to ask you. So, but at the same time, when we talk about pink washing, many queer researchers are telling me to be very cautious, because it's also problematic notion sometimes to say it's a pink washing and so on. But I want to ask you the identity, like what the queer community in Istanbul associates with as heritage, or like why are you referring to eco-sexuality or
Difficult questions, big questions. Like it's more like more social study questions, a little bit. But from my perspective, what can I say? I don't know.
You can.
I can tell. I mean, Islam. When you ask, like, if the queer community in Istanbul identifies as Muslims, not really. I have a few friends who are religious. They are Muslims, but apart from that, I think Turkey has this. There's a big. Separation exactly between the liberals and the religious people, and it's horrible, but it's the reality. So I think it's very difficult in Turkey to be in the queer community as a religious Muslim person. Definitely there's and this is the fault of the queer community. We need to be more open to this idea. Hopefully, it will happen. And pink washing, yes, I mean, it's horrible. It angers me a lot. But it happens in the queer community in Istanbul as well. So not many people are talking about Palestine at the moment within the queer community.
So, can I take her? Like, yeah, and even I was raised as a very secular person. Because of the Islamophobia, I'm also trying to find, I mean, it's not projected relations to Islam, but I also ask you, is the repetition of wallpaper like the Islamic ornament, you know, the Greek and like it goes to eternity, the gaze is resolving. So, and she was like, I will learn one day. And you were like, but it's the repetition, it also exists in the nature. So probably Islamic art refers to nature as well. And if we look for connections, we find connections. And one of when I try to contextualize you, Zoe, I really like this. Now I'm like also communicating the themes of the exhibition. But one point about homosexuality, which was not problematized in Islamic countries, is the explanation for that the Greek tradition was not really cut off like in the medieval age in Europe. So one Islamic scholar says, Thomas Bauer is a German Islamwissenschaftler, it's so extremely false to call Islamic culture medieval, or like, because when you don't find something civilized, you compare it as like with Middle Ages, because there was no Middle Age in the Islamic countries. There was a fluid continuation of Greek culture and Roman culture. And your references are also sometimes very punctual with Greek tradition. So can you tell us more about your references?
I think, yeah, I guess like I definitely looked back at some, I like to like mix different time periods, I suppose. But I think one thing, I was researching a lot of the history of the dildo like a long time ago for like a thesis I did for my master's. And part of that kind of took me to like Greco-Roman, well, Greek times of like the sort of these first mentions of dildos, which Olisbos, but kind of in like comedies and different things. And I'm quite interested in like this idea of commodity objects and the first kind of luxury objects in that kind of culture, and then it coming like this kind of value system, but also like mixed with sex. So there's something like, also arguably you could say they're kind of like ritualized, but they could be used for ceremony as well, and maybe also in before, you know, that time, and in other cultures, or in, you know, like there are ancient, like prehistoric phallic objects as well. So like a lot of this is a bit like, it could be a bit like pop, like research on, because I think like the thing of like researching anything that is to do with sexuality at some point in the past, it's like, yeah, it could have also been embroiled with other, things. I'm not explaining it well, but it's like whether or not that's actually a reality, or people's kind of like desires to think about these things as that. But so that's like a really long-winded answer. But yeah, I guess that's kind of something I was interested in that.
No,
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, because when I find this Ottoman old white people dominating the I know I'm so horrible. But and they probably will not like the exhibition. when I find the Ottoman erotica in Canan's work, of course, it's a question. It's something you encounter for the first time, like for me, and how much could you can one appropriate it as a part of your heritage? It's a interesting question. So, but at the same time, we need historical references to create an erotic visual language, but also maybe discourse. So I can understand totally that it starts with the dildo research and goes to other.
Yeah. And also like maybe that dildos are like these performative objects as well, right? Because
Yeah.
they're used and yeah. So I liked that double,
Yeah,
a double
yeah.
thing of it being.
The director,
Yeah.
he's not even. Are you listening? No, he wanted to stage them behind the glass vitrines, and I was like, I really like the no, but it was one idea, one option. Okay, I'm just using you teasing you. It will be I will be punished for that later. But I really like this idea of performative aspect. Maybe they were used, but they look like hard to insert. But I really like the idea that these are dildos, and these were shown without any protection. Yeah.
No, they
And
don't, they shouldn't have. Yeah, like because then it becomes too much like museological.
yeah, and
So maybe-
and it's called in German Berührungsangst. Like, well, how would you translate it? The fear of touch, like,
Well, the
but
fear
also
of
for people, for the So it's So and I actually want to open the discussion, but I want to ask you about the question of femininity, which plays a very important role in your work as also as a performance, but also probably as an Albanian woman, you can show your femininity in totally different ways, which could be perceived here as something too much or too.
I think it's always really, I mean, also the work that you see behind the Orientalist sculpture, the like almost abstract painting like sewings of the hijabs really speak about how our identity transcends into fabric, and this fabric being like the most, actually probably the most politicized textile that we have, being used to justify imperialism. Like on the other side of the wall, for example, you see apart from like Algerian prisoners who have been unveiled by the French military, you also see images of Afghan women being showed to George W. Bush. They were in miniskirts, so they were showing Bush how free Afghanistan was to justify that the U.S. has to have a military invasion in Afghanistan. Apart from this fabric, of course, also being a highly personal fabric, also something I use when I pray and something that connects you to the divine. I'm really interested in how identity is something non-dualist that has traces in objects and in things, and there's a social life that objects have, and we could write biographies for objects, and objects the way they're being circulated, they have different meanings. So, of course, femininity is something that is a performance that is constructed in different social contexts, completely tied to various factors that are intersectional: class, religion, sexuality, race. So for a while I've been working a lot on hyperfemininity, because a Western canon that comes from like a Christian Puritanist view, where and also a Marxist leftist reading, where everything that is above a necessity is seen as something that is bringing you further away from your true self. So the performativity of an artificial femininity and something that is hyperfem is something that can only be a subjugation to the male gaze, because women can't enjoy fucking themselves, and they also can't enjoy being sexy if they don't want to do this for pleasing a patriarchal gaze. And I think that's something funny that queer communities also have a lot, like lipstick lesbians are sometimes very lonely because we have this like mainstream feminist narrative that the self is pre-existing and natural, and it's not performative, and it's not an utopia that you build, but it's something that like is God-given. So it's a very Amish thought, actually. I think that was like this performativity and playing with it, and also with a less moralistic idea, not saying this femininity is the right femininity or this modest femininity or more laid back is the wrong femininity, but just like playing with how objects tell these geopolitical stories.
Yeah. Downstairs, Canan is unfortunately not with us today. She got injured by installing Şahmaran downstairs. But they are her second series, and these are Bahname 2, and we look at like Ottoman couples making sex, and the texts are explaining how to do it correctly. And what was historically interesting, when Ottomans adapting these kind of miniatures from the Iranian culture, they were Ottomanizing it by changing the costume. So the erotica was always depicted in costumes, and they were proudly appropriating Persian miniatures by changing the costume. So erotic belongs to you, and you are proudly showing off. But interestingly, in European culture, you always need another referential point, like Greek culture referring to mythological images, or like you are painting Orientalist paintings and imagining Orient as hyper-sexual, hyper-feminine space. But now, probably nowadays, we can be secure about our sexuality, or like appropriating it. And when I was writing about your avatar, one comparison was this Olaf Metz Turkish delight sculpture that shows a like Turkish woman fully, or like a migrant woman with headscarf, but it's a sculpture and she's completely naked and frontal. And it was even like installed, showed publicly, and it get attacked, which we can understand because it's kind of respect. Yeah. It's a thank you. So when you do your avatar, it's also very sexy, but it's not. It's a very small in comparison to life size. So what kind of like how are you dealing with having you as a three-dimensional object, or like artwork?
So I think my sculpture would not work if it wouldn't have the video work, and the video work would not give the context. I think, of course, it could work because it's like really ridiculous. Also, like who's wearing a bikini and a turban in that combination. I mean, you already see that it's like and then you have like this shiny lacquer that Snoop Dogg used in Pimp My Ride. So of course, like there's already in the sculpture itself, there's a play, but the video work is really important inside it because it gives you the context on how I'm playing with these tropes. Whereas Metzel's intent, and it's really funny because I didn't know the dude when I did the work, and then like a curator from Hamburger Bahnhof was like, oh, this work reminds me of Metzel, and I was like, okay, cool. So his intent was to show the contrast that women are in, and that's why he wanted to like show the punani and show the hijab, and of course that's like it's such a, I don't know, like it's like redoing the violence without actually breaking the violence. I think that's the problem, right? So I think we can all work with cliches, and I think we're really far away from having moved beyond cliches. I think we're in the depth of it, like, right, homo nationalism right now is really big. People are standing on people's graves with queer pride flag, like we're not away from it, our grief is constantly being instrumentalized to defend violence in different contexts. So I do think that it's really important to see how you contextualize things. And that's also why it was the commission and like working with Irvin's archive was something that it was very important for me to do this with a form of sensitivity and also respect for, like, the West has this Foucaultian idea that the moment you speak about sexuality in public space, you are free. You have made your religious confession, and visibility alone is going to give you safety and freedom, may that be as queer people or as women. There's just sometimes also a cultural difference, and it doesn't always mean that not talking about sex in public in the way the West is talking about sex in public is in itself something that is moralistically less good. And I do not want to tap into this white supremacist idea that only the way the West talks about sex is something that is ethically okay. So that's why I think that's also what hurt people in Olaf Metzel's work, is that, like, if a woman wants to cover herself because that's the way she feels guarded by the divine, she has the right for her pussy not to be shown. I think that's something that I do not want to reproduce. At the same time, I also think that it's beautiful to speak about sex and lovemaking in public, and it's very political, and we have to find ways to have societies where we can embrace a multiplicity of being and have space for all of them.
Thank you. Yeah. I will ask the last same question because you both define yourself as queer people, and so the biological sex is something could be like essentializing, so it can be problematic to be related with the genitals, but at the same time, when you create erotic imagery, of course you go to genitals. And my exhibition starts with your fishy, crazy vulvic shoe kind, the drawing. I don't know. I actually, as an art historian, I should be able to describe drawings, but it's hard to describe. It's kind of this. It also has this fear of vagina, vulva, but at the same time, it's your drawing. So I want to ask you both how you create vulvar imagery that are not really vulvas, or are they vulvas?
Yeah. Well, the image of it's kind of like the legs apart with this like shoe, like it's basically a shoe going into someone's vulva. Yes. Yeah, it's a shoe. So it's meant, but kind of a fleshy shoe. I often use shoes as these like fleshy. I'm quite interested in them being like, well, they are like kind of these like classic fetish objects, right? A shoe, but also they're kind of grotesque because they mold to your feet. They smell, and they can be quite painful. There's these different things about them. So I guess that it was this idea of this shoe being inserted, but also becoming like this kind of vulvic symbol as well. So like this double, so like a kind of abject but also desiring thing. And it was actually, I made that work because it was in kind of relation to this artist Karol Rama, who I really like. He's an Italian artist from like last century, but did a lot of these very erotic watercolors in the 30s, and so like fascist Italy time, and they were censored really heavily at the time. But so she used a lot of shoes and these different kind of objects. So it's kind of like an ode to her, but also this my own like language, I guess. Yeah. And there are gems around it. So it's like this pun of like the crown jewels or this, which is like in English, the pun of crown jewels is for like genitals, but in a vulgar way. Yeah. So anyway.
It doesn't sound so so vulgar, actually.
It doesn't
No,
sound
no,
vulgar, no, but it's
No.
sort of like you would say it as slang, yeah, or like, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but maybe before I give you the micro, I want to ask you one point. It's again my observation. In the Islamic tradition, there are so many erotic components, but this abject, this maybe you should describe the abject, this darker side, this disgusting side is not very present, interestingly. There is one thing I really like to tell, like Ottomans talk about sex like they talk about food. So it's about the taste and your preferences. So there are so many food comparisons and metaphors. And food plays also an important role in your practice. But can you also tell us about the abject side of sexuality? No.
Oh, well, that might be that, yeah, I don't know.
Is it related to Christianity? Would you say
Quite
that?
sure the shame of,
Shame,
all
yeah.
this, yeah. Well, that
Like
does.
dark and
Yeah, but
guilt.
well, yeah, I suppose it is that, but also something like abjection would be, yeah, kind of like a body horror
Yeah.
of a fear of liquids. And so, yeah, maybe that is something that's definitely like a kind of Christian shame thing. But also I think that we do have, like there are these like taboos or things about different bodily fluids, say, or films on the body, or these different things, or like innards, even insides. So I guess it's this, yeah, and maybe that is more, yeah.
Yeah. I invited Mitu Sanyal for the program. She's an Indian author, born in, I think, in Germany. And she wrote a book about vulva. And I was reading the part how British people were explaining the weak bodies of Indian men because they are having so much sex with their women. They're losing so many body fluids, like sperma, and they dried out. So they are becoming weak. So you have to be a very strong sexual moral to have a strong, healthy body.
Keep it
and
in.
these
Yeah.
fluids, it's such a yeah. And there is this big discussions about finding the right balance of fluids in your body. How much you can lose, how much you can get. So, but in the lesbian realm, it's not a like a subject for being fearful, or like to be afraid of.
Okay. Now I'll talk about the fluids in lesbian. Okay. So in my work, I use a lot of golden showers as well, and I'm actually really interested in the female ejaculation because that's not something that's talked about a lot. People think only men can come like that, but actually there is such thing as female ejaculation, and okay, fluids in and. They are vulvas. Actually, I'm interested in the body, but the body of not just humans or not just cis bodies, but could be bodies of plants or like unliving, like it could be stones or living or unliving. In my work, I don't have the hierarchical divide for that. So, and they are vulvas. And sometimes I use like cis female vulvas, sometimes trans woman vulvas, and sometimes they have multiple clitorises. It's just, I think my work is very intuitive, so I don't plan it before. It just like flows at that moment. And I think there are a lot of vulvas, but vulvas aren't the only body part I'm interested in. Like, I think.
So I think it's the best point to open the discussion to the public. I know it's hard to ask questions with such topics, but I will be very thankful if you have any question.
Hi. So I had a question for you, Zoe. I was really intrigued by this concept of activation. So activating the piece or the object. And I was trying to understand the concept, how you were describing it. To me, so I'm not sure if I totally got it. To me, it was sort of like, okay, you are appealing to the person or to the audience or to the person who is experiencing the object or interacting with it, or like you are activating it by this interaction. Like, am I clear with my question?
Yeah, I think so. Like, if I'm thinking the performative like act is by people interacting, right? Yeah, or yeah.
So your idea of activation for the objects that you're using. Because you also mentioned like it's being activated with the golden showers or with an act at one point.
Yeah, I think like that's maybe if I would be doing a performance, say, or it's in a video or like a setting, then I and like other performers might physically activate the objects. But then like I did this, an installation, for example, which is like kind of like a giant boudoir bedroom. And the people had to come in and like look or walk around and be enveloped in this space, I guess. And that people having to maybe also like the way of like there being a lot of excessive detail in the work, having to kind of interact with that or look down or if there's like a reflective aspect that people are like implicated in that by experience, or if also like I use scent and sound often, like those kind of things that implicate. So it's like, but I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it's clearer now. Yeah, thanks.
Other question? You want to ask a second question? If I you can. Yeah, sure. Thank God for immigrants, I want to say, because otherwise Germans don't talk. I don't understand. You can ask questions, guys, because we know you are all
statement. We don't buy it.
It's thank God for immigrants is a generous thing.
No, the Germans don't buy it.
Yeah, because you can ask questions. You are not, are you? I mean, it's better not to ask bad questions than questions. No, I won't.
Every question is welcome.
Yeah, every question is welcome.
So I have a question for you. So I was really curious because I heard that you said like, okay, we started with the wallpapers, like photography of queer sex and putting them on the walls. If I like also coming from Albania, which is, I mean, also atheist country, but the majority is Muslim. I was just imagining like something like this happening in my country and how the world would turn upside down and chaos would go in the streets and people would stand up and like protest this craziness, whatever, which has happened recently. Actually, it's crazy. But so I was wondering, like, how was that experience? Like, what happened when you did this?
I actually did this in London. But London wasn't that open-minded. I'm talking about year 2000. So there was already a law in London, in England, that public decency law, you couldn't hold your partner's hand in the street. So that law was still on. It was taken out in 2003, I think. And I took photos and I went to develop them because there was no digital photography then. And I was thrown out of the photo company because they said it offended their workers, these photos. So it was a bit difficult to try to find some place to develop the photos. But in Turkey, for example, now recently, 2 years ago, I made a wallpaper. It was on a 6 meters wall in a public gallery in a very conservative area, actually. And it was depicting two lovers having sex, and it was quite explicit, but nothing bad happened. And even the local people were having a look at it. Yes, at the moment in Turkey, there is no such censorship. With my work, at least, it didn't happen.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Actually, your commission made me get my first deleted post on Instagram in a really long time because somebody reported me for the paintings. So I do think sometimes we have a false link between religion and conservatism, and various kinds of religions have very intense conservatism. If that's Hinduism, it's Buddhism, it's Islam, it's Christianity. But patriarchy in itself is not linked to religion in itself. And the anti-sex guidelines of Meta and the Apple Store are actually really intense and very Puritan, and they should allow painting from the 19th century. But if somebody reports you that that painting is offensive to their eyes, they still have the right to delete your painting.
Yeah, and it was two women having, like, it was a miniature of
Yeah,
two women
having sex.
with a dildo.
Yeah.
It was not so pornographic. It was not pornographic at all, but it was.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because there's this like really crazy double narrative that like porn is more accessible than it has ever been, and also very derogatory forms of sexuality are a crazy big commodity. There's a lot of child trafficking in that. There's a lot of sexualized and racialized, also like present day slavery happening in sexual industries. So there is definitely violence tied to the industry. But then when it's about showing pretty paintings from 200 years ago, we get really, really angry.
You should bring the mic to the people. That's forgiven. I have a question to you, Anna, and it's a real question. It's about something I don't understand. What I saw in your work, but also in other often young artists' works, or which can be seen downstairs in Tabita's video as well, that twerking somehow has become a kind of like subversive or self-empowering thing. And in my generation, perhaps, or older, it was always this idea when people do booty shaking or things connected to it, it's about red light and it's about the commodification of women in the patriarchal economy. Yeah. And can you explain me where it came from or how it has become this kind of self-empowering almost subversive practice? Or is that actually right, this observation? But it was my feeling.
Yeah, I think so. There's multiple layers to this. I think there's three cultures coming together here. You're a white man, and white feminism has created that narrative that I quickly spoke about, that sex is only a form of subjugation to the male gaze. Whereas twerking comes from African and then enslaved African women going to the Americas. So the present day way we twerk comes from New Orleans, and New Orleans like booty culture. But the ancestral is West African twerking or Sub-Saharan African. You also have it in Lesotho. And these are sacral dances to release trauma that's stored in the hips. So also a lot of Hindu culture speaks about like our body being an archive and our emotions being stuck. So when you shake your booty a lot, you can release well. Second thing that is happening is, which is really funny. So because I come from a space, Albania and Turkey and Egypt, but that's my ancestors, I don't know them. My, let's say, primary relatives are mostly in Albania. And when my mom left my father, she really wanted to do belly dancing because being a very patriarchal society, like funnily enough, for example, I once translated with a Catholic family in the north, and I was the first woman they had ever seen in a crop top. You know, like really, again, like your conservatism not being really linked to, I think Catholics are the smallest group in Albania. Most are Orthodox Christians. But anyway, my mom really wanted to do belly dancing because actually it's something you do to a certain degree at weddings, but it's also something hoes do. So her parents didn't allow her to do belly dancing. And right now in Egypt, the biggest group that is doing belly dancing is Ukrainian and Russian women, because it's not part of their culture, so they're subjugated to other slut shaming. When I was in high school in Germany, all the girls around me were slut shamed, but there's always specific traits that are part of the slut shaming of your culture, and belly dancing is so big in Germany, you don't have it. Oopala. So of course, reclaiming something that is joy to your body that people have slut shamed you for can be an act of empowerment, right? And then secondly, the twerking that is part of dance hall culture. I mean, dance hall culture is a direct remnant of the transatlantic slave trade. So it's in direct opposition. So I do think also it depends on who twerks. And like if Miley Cyrus is twerking and she's not saying it's black culture, it's not very liberating. But for Jamaican people and the amount of violence they've been subjugated to twerk and to remove some stress from their bodies, very liberating.
Thank you.
Do you have other questions? No. It's hard. So you have perfect.
Yes. I'm coming from just another, sorry for my English, from just another angle, but I'm curious, I have to ask you, because I was reading poetry from Old Egypt, Arabian, and I was amazed of a beautiful erotical poetry where women also wrote, and they were very, very, very free and very conscious of their body and without any shame or fear. So my question is, how is the relationship to this kind of poetry or this kind of literature today in Islamic world?
So I think because we have so many millions and billions of Muslims, it's very difficult to speak about one Islamic world. There's like multiple Islams, I think.
But yours,
Islam,
maybe.
yeah, Islam in Indonesia, for example, has very different body concepts than Islam in Senegal does or in Nigeria. But I think because of this, even within my contexts, there's very different. Islam doesn't really have, like, there's the Quran, where everybody agrees upon. And then there's multiple hadith, for example, and nobody agrees on the same hadith, for example. So in Egypt, some people read a hadith Bukhari, which is like a second book speaking about the rules of how you should behave the Sharia. And they shame what these women have been doing. Also, when you watch the video work downstairs, the 50-minute was long, but it talks a lot about how a certain type of gender fluidity through actually British colonial law, like anti-sodomia law first, then has been, like I said before, twisted to be saying like, this is what the West is doing and we're not doing this and we're not sex positive. But at the same time, also within Albania or Egypt, you have people that say my Islam is sex positive, my Islam is queer, this is what we have been doing since the antiquity. But I would say that there's a big variety even within like cultural traditions in the country. Also, I'm talking to a journalist called Mohammed Amjahid in the video work, and he wrote this really fun book called Let's Talk About Sex, Habibi. It's in German. It's not, unfortunately, it's not translated to English. And it's a great Sunday read. It really talks about like sex from Cairo to Casablanca and all the multiple forms. It's really fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this question. It's a very important question because I'm from Turkey and our Arabic knowledge is only from the words that are taken from Arabic to Turkish. But when we think about Arabic, because of the representation, we always think about this punitive language of Quran and terrorism and this kind of stuff. But at the same time, Arabic language has the most of the variation for love. So many words can describe different forms of love, and love poetry is such a old tradition. It's also actually pre-Islamic tradition. The love poetry starts in Arabic very early, and then in Islamic period it goes further. There are also explanation this troubadours, the first romantic poetry has a connection to Spain and Arabic poetry, and we don't know it. And as you say, there are also many female women writers. And actually, through Faruzat, for instance, some Iranian very important author, and we know her poetry in Turkish, but it's also, actually, I love Iranian people. They have such a connection to their own poetry because the language is still very similar to other centuries.
Yes, I'm coming from Bosnia, so we have this connection with Ottoman and also with Iranian.
Yeah.
So I was always amazed in that kind of literature or poetry, especially what kind of symbols are they using?
Yeah.
Because you were also speaking about nature and feminine symbols. So very, very early they are speaking about vulva, like Granatapfel. I don't know how it's in English.
Yeah.
And the figs
Great.
are there,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
the fruits which are very, very essential and
Juicy. Yeah.
pomegranate.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
so-
Yeah,
Yes.
and and I'm very thankful for this question, because when I choose the notion of re-enchantment, sex re-enchanted, it's all about that instead of fighting against violent patriarchal language and all the horrible things are happening in the world, there is also this form of resistance that does not repeat the horrible, disgusting aspects of our
That's
reality.
what attracted me also to come
Yeah,
here.
yeah. I'm so happy that you
Thank
came.
you.
If there is no other questions, I think I will end the artist talk, because Zoe has to go catch her train. Yeah. Or do you have any? It's your last chance, maybe. No. No. Okay. Thank you for coming, everyone.